This is session 2, exploring writing resources for K-12 virtual learning spaces. And so welcome and thank you all for being here. We will be here for about an hour. And we all know, of course, that engaging students in writing during this emergency online teaching can be quite a challenge. And so we are going to explore a lot of opportunities to engage them in joyful and meaningful ways and help them connect to their peers through common experiences. And so to talk to us about that, we have Dr. Fahrenbrook.
Thank you, Erica. Welcome, everyone. As Erica said, my name is Mary Fahrenbrook. I have an agenda. I always like to let everybody know where we're headed before we get going. So Erica did our announcements for us. I'll do a quick introduction of myself, and then we'll talk about the components of language arts, which I use as a framework for the work that we're going to do today. I have a read aloud for you, the map of good memories, and then we'll explore that read aloud and ways to use it with the components of language arts. I'll share with you, and then we'll have a closing. If there's anything you'd like to add to the agenda, type it in the chat, please, and Erica will let us know and we'll add that on. A few logistics before we get started. So all links are on a slide at the end of this PowerPoint. So throughout the PowerPoint, you'll notice that I have some hot links, and they may or may not work for you. Don't worry about it, because at the very last slide are the full links. So no need to stress about those. Throughout the PowerPoint, I have text printed in red. The red text is an invitation for you to join in on the presentation, and you'll see those throughout. Erica's going to monitor the chat box for us. Thank you so much, Erica. So please type any questions or comments that you have into the chat box, and Erica will monitor that for us, and she'll share those with me. So let's go ahead and get started with introductions. My name is Mary Fahrenbrook. When I was in 3rd grade, all of my friends got the challenge spelling word America, and my challenge spelling word was Fahrenbrook, because I still didn't know how to spell it. So if you mispronounce it or you're not sure how to spell it, I completely understand. I'm an associate professor in the Teacher Preparation, Administration, and Leadership program at New Mexico State University. My experiences have been in K-12. I am a kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade teacher. I earned my stripes with the little ones. I also did a couple of years in 4th grade. I survived middle school PE, and I was a K-12 literacy consultant. And what I need for you to know, in full disclosure, is that my K-12 experiences have been face-to-face. I have not done what you have done and what you're being asked to do right now. All of my online experience has been at the university level. And the difference then becomes that these university students are familiar with online learning. They have expectations about how this is going to go. They also have the hardware and software to support them, so they're very well prepared to come to our online courses. I understand completely that that is not the case with what's happening with a lot of our teachers across the country. I do want you to know that I admire you greatly. I applaud you. I applaud you for your courage and your stamina and your creativity. You're being asked to do something that's never been done before in the history of the world, I think. So I think you guys are amazing, and I have the utmost respect for you. I hope today that I can give you something that you can use in that space that you've been working in since last March. When I create my learning engagements for any of my students, K-12 or at the university level, I ground them in my beliefs about learning. I'm not going to read these to you. I'll let you read them while I chat. These are similar to what you might have as your philosophy of education. I tie all of my work to these beliefs because I want it very, very dear to me.
Yeah, I'll have to be kind of weird.
That there are just a few of them, but they're very concise. I also have one other practical belief, and it's that I like to do $5 worth of prep for $50 worth of learning. I see some nodding going on. Exactly. So I work with pre-service teachers, and oftentimes what they'll do is $50 worth of prep for $5 worth of learning. I catch them going to Hobby Lobby to get glitter and punch out letters and decorative paper. And by the middle of the semester, they're exhausted. And I have to tell them this isn't real life for teachers. So I try to get them to flip their thinking to do that $5 worth of prep to get $50 worth of learning. And I hope that that's what I've prepared for you today. So with that, I'm going to start with my process. And my process is that I use a framework. And a framework can be defined in a number of different ways. And so for this particular engagement, I use the framework of language arts. So everything that I'm going to do in these engagements relates to reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing, or visually representing. And I can tie everything back to that. So I choose a framework and then I choose a theme. And for this particular engagement, I chose the theme of home. Themes are broad. They're not narrow. Those narrow things are topics. So if you're having students look at basketball or dogs or the state of New Mexico, that's more of a topic. A theme is very broad. So home is a theme. Journeys is a theme. Sense of place is a theme. And I selected home because everyone typically has a place where they call home. Home looks different for all of us, but we typically have a place that we call home. And so what I'd like to do, here's the red text. I'm going to invite you to type into the chat. What are some sayings about home? The example I have here is, there's no place like home. That could be part of my theme. Will you type your ideas for home in the chat, and Erica will share those with us.
Home is where the heart is. My home is the open road. Home is where the heart is several times. Comfort. Home sweet home. No place like home. Home is where you are loved. Home is where your story or our story begins.
Thank you for sharing those. As you're writing down notes, take a look in that chat and write down some of those sayings that people have typed in there, because those can become your theme, right? So we just generated a whole bunch of ideas for each other. Then what I do is I anchor everything in a book. My degree is in children's literature, and I'm on several boards of children's and adolescent literature. I love books, I love stories. And so I typically have an anchor text that I attach to everything. And so I wanted to give you some resources of where you can go to find some anchor texts. And so one of these is and remember, here's $5 worth of prep, right? So here's some free resources for students and families at Z Library. So let me stop sharing and go to the Z Library webpage. So on the Z Library, you'll notice when you get there that there are a whole bunch of different books listed. These are our offerings that they have. Some of these are free and some of them you'll have to pay for. So here's what I do when I get going. I choose a book, and let's just choose Becoming by Michelle Obama. And the first thing that I need to do is I need to go here to the download, and you can see that this is an EPUB format. If you click down here, you can see that they're all EPUB formats except for the last one, which is a Mobi. I cannot support that with my laptop, so I cannot support this book unless I pay for it. And I am not someone who pays, so I will wait till it becomes available. If I go up here in the search tool and I type in The Alchemist, which I don't know if you've read this, but it's an awesome book. I suggest everybody read it once, at least. Let me bring it up and show you the formats for The Alchemist. So here you can see that it's an EPUB format, but if you open this, you'll see that you can download it as a PDF. So be sure you check the download format before you try to download. And the reason I tell you this is because you only get 5 downloads every 24 hours. So know that as well. And that's called Z Library. Some of my students actually get their textbooks from there. Let me go back and we'll click on Storyline, which is the next resource for you. Maybe you can click on Storyline. So on Storyline, what you're going to find are picture books for children. And I really like the picture books on Storyline because they're read by celebrities. So if you have Storyline open, click on the letter H if you're on that search tool. And if not, you'll have a row of books. Just click on one of the books. You can see how well these are developed. They're professionally videoed and they're just very well done. If you click on that book, underneath it, there's an opportunity for you to download some teacher resources. So you get a book and you get some resources with Storyline. You'll need to modify those to meet the needs of your students. The other way that you can go about creating a way for students to read and listen to books is to create your own read aloud. And this is what I like to do because my students get to hear my voice. And my students have often said to me, we don't feel connected anymore because we're in this online learning space. And so I record a lot of my voice on my videos, my instructional videos, and my read alouds. I think it helps to establish that connection that they get to hear me. So the book that I chose for this is called The Map of Good Memories, and I'm going to read this to you. While I'm reading this, we're going to do a strategy called Say Something, and you can do this when you're reading online as well. So how this works is, while I'm reading, I'm going to stop at points, and I'm going to ask you to say something by typing in the chat, whatever it is you're thinking at this time. And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter what you're thinking. Hopefully you're thinking about the story, but sometimes when I work with students, I get things like, when is lunch? Or is this almost over? That sort of thing. So be prepared for those kind of random responses to say something. So let me get started here with the map of good memories. And you can sit back and relax and enjoy the story. This is a great profession. Where else do you get to have PD where you get to listen to a story? The Map of Good Memories by Fran Nuno and Susanna Salege. I always show the cover and the end pages. End pages usually give a hint to the story. Here's the title page. And here we go. I'm going to read from my book right here. Zoe had lived in the city since she was born, but now, because of the war, she had to flee with her family and take refuge in another country. The night before she left, she decided to do a little experiment. She spread out a map of the city on the table and started to mark all of the places where she had spent her happiest times in the 10 years of her life. You can see up here, starts with Zoe's house, goes to Grandma's, and then around the corner to the old factory and so on. First, she marked the house where she lived. Here she had learned to walk and spoken her first words. Her room had always been a wonderful place full of games and daydreams. Her home had become a place full of good memories. Then she marked the place where she was at that particular moment, her school. While she did it, she ran through the names of her teachers and her favorite classmates. She had been at school for so long, but Zoe was never bored, and she loved learning new things every day. Then she marked the library and the bookshop, which were still in her neighborhood. They were two places she absolutely loved. The people who worked there introduced her to books that filled her with all different kinds of emotions. Their shelves were full of real treasures. The park in the middle of the city was another special place of good memories. Its trees and bushes made her feel like she was in another world. It was an island of green filled with different kinds of animals. She'd spent many Sunday mornings there, playing on the swings, listening to people, playing music, and riding her bike. Let's pause there and say something. Type what you're thinking about in the chat, please.
How sad Zoe must have felt. Does she have any siblings? Beautiful watercolor. Great vision of books. I felt sad for her having to leave her home. So many memories forming with everything she did. Zoe imagines happiness with home and school, memories of a beautiful childhood. I am thinking about her map. This makes me think of the things she may have missed.
Thank you, everyone. Is there one more, Erica?
Reminiscing.
Thank you. Let's continue on. Zoe loved going to the movies, so she drew a circle around her favorite cinema and remembered all the films she'd enjoyed there. She also thought about the candy counter, the big seats, the lady who showed you to your seat with a flashlight, and the magic of the big screen. The river was also marked on her map. Her favorite place was next to the North Bridge, where sometimes she could see fish in the water and a family of ducks who loved eating crumbs of bread. She kept going until she had marked all the places that made her feel happy. After looking at the points scattered over the map, she started to connect them with a red pencil in the order she had discovered them throughout her life. She wanted to know what kind of shape would appear by joining all the good memories together. When she looked up, Zoe could not believe what she saw. Let's stop there. Say something.
What did she see? I'm wondering what shape she saw. Did she see a heart? What's to come? What did she see?
Let's turn the page and find out what the author put in the story. The shape on the map made the letters of her name. You see the Z, the O, and the E? Though he didn't know if this had happened by accident or if it meant something. Perhaps it was the city's way of saying goodbye to her. What she did know is that wherever she went, all of the wonderful memories she had would always be with her. Zoe tucked the map of good memories neatly into her suitcase. It was the map of a city she was sure she'd return to one day. Author's note. To see the modern world with the eyes of the child I once was, with the eyes of the children I meet. Philippe Delerme. More than anything else, this book is about saying farewell. Zoe, the main character, says goodbye to the city where she has always lived. Because of the war, she has to flee with her family to another country and has no idea what will become of her. Her name, which is Greek in origin, means life. And through her memories, we discover some of those good times, those simple pleasures that life sometimes gives us, and where true happiness may be found. The happiness that Zoe, unfortunately, is about to lose. I have always enjoyed books that talk about these simple daily pleasures, which encourage the reader to think about their own and make a list. I cannot deny that I would love the readers of this story to do the same experiment that Zoe does with the map of her city and then discover the result. I would like to end with the hope-filled words that Anne Frank once wrote in her diary. One day, this terrible war will be over. Fran Nuno. Say something.
Wow. What a lovely story and a heart-tugging ending.
So remember, don't overthink it when you're saying something. Just whatever's in your mind, write it down.
Beautiful story. We hold on to what matters, and memory brings moments of happiness when we are feeling sad. I just think of all the children who have fled their countries because of war. It is a lovely story. War ends things, memories last forever. Hope. I keep seeing the broken tree on the final page. Let's spread love.
So one of the things that I want to mention is about the book, The Map of Good Memories. So first of all, it's available in Spanish, so you can access it that way. Second, it is not available on Storyline. I checked, so that's not helpful to us. But the other thing that I want to tell you that when you choose a story for these types of themes, it needs to be a compelling book. It needs to have something in it that your students will care about. And if you find that your lesson that you've planned is not really engaging children, it might be the story. And give yourself permission to just end it, put it away, and try it again, right? If it's not going to work, just end it and then move on. But try to choose a book that's really compelling for your students. Something that's I always say that it's something that they can chew on for a while. Okay, so the book choice is very, very important. Then with that in mind, we move into planning some engagements. And so again, I want to remind you of the components of language arts that I use to frame this. So all of my activities will encompass at least one of these components, sometimes two, sometimes three. So the first one is the obvious one, right? So we could do some visually representing. You could ask students to draw a map of their own good memories. From a bird's eye view is what I usually tell my students. So they could draw their bedroom, they could draw their home, their backyard. If they're high school students, they could draw their place of employment. Will you share some of your ideas for maps in the chat?
School.
This is what online wait time looks like, right?
Favorite day or event, a place they spent a summer in, grandparents maybe. Their favorite room at home. Draw a map of travels across the country. neighborhood or street.
And that's what I did. I like to model for students what I have for expectations. It's called whole to part to whole teaching. So I show them the whole thing, and then we talk about the parts of it so that they can make their own whole. So here's my whole, if you will, and this is my neighborhood. I grew up on 9th and Park Street, and this is the school. I lived near the grade school, and the high school was over here. This is my home right here. And what I would tell my students is to notice the different things about the map. Notice that I included a key, that I used color, that I used symbols throughout my map, right? So I'm modeling for them some of the things that they can put in their map. So I would encourage you to do that if you ask students to draw a map of their good memories. So one of the things that you could do then, just like in the book for visually representing and also for speaking, because they'll tell about it, is you can ask students to draw a line that connects the places in their map of good memories, just like the author suggests. So once they create these maps and their lines, you can ask them to share these maps in kind of more non-traditional ways. And so one of those ways is Padlet. And Padlet is a program that you can get up to 3. Padlets are like a panel, and students can paste everything on a panel. Imagine like a bulletin board, if you will. You can get 3 Padlets for free. And then after that, you have to pay for them. But I've discovered that if I delete my Padlets, I will get another free one. So what I would do is I would put Map of Good Memories on one of the Padlets, one of the screens, and ask my students to upload the picture of their map of good memories. Another place to go that's free for teachers is called Wakelet. It's a lot like Padlet. Wakelet does offer free weekly tutorials to help you manage your particular Wakelet site. So there is support there. Padlet, I found that I just kind of had to explore on my own. So these are 2 places where you can ask students to share sort of in a non-traditional way, but it does encompass one of the language arts, viewing. Here's what mine looks like. I started in the house because I wasn't allowed out. Then I went into the yard when I was old enough. And then this was an empty lot next door, right? And so you can follow the progression through here. What do you think my line looks like? It doesn't spell my name, obviously.
An elf boot.
That's what I thought of too. I thought it looked like an elf boot. So if we continue on with this, and we can incorporate some speaking and viewing engagements into this as well. So what you can also ask students to do is to share their maps in a video where they'll hold their map up and then they'll talk about it. You can use Screencast-O-Matic for school districts that are using Canvas. I just recorded a bunch of videos this afternoon in my Canvas course. And again, it's a great way for students to practice their speaking. And then you can ask them to view each other's videos. So they're speaking and viewing and listening in there. So one of the things that I do when I ask my students to share is I ask them to share something specific. Because if I don't, then I have them sharing all kinds of things and it's really hard to assess. So I encourage you that if you ask your students to share, that you ask them for something specific. So you might ask for the location of the map. Is it your bedroom? Is it your backyard? And then ask them why they chose this location. You might ask them to make a connection between their map and Zoe's map. What's the same and what's different? You might ask the location of a memory that they would like to write about first. And that will be one of the writing activities that we have. Can you think of any other things that you could ask students to share about when they hold their map up? Go ahead and type those in the chat.
Linda says why they chose the colors they used. Symbols used and significance. Why they selected the location.
So be sure to ask for something specific when you ask them to record. Are there a few more, Erica?
Yes, their feelings when they think about the certain places. Why did they include those places or that room?
I have a few other tips that I've learned by asking my students to share on videos that I'd like to offer you. The first tip is to set a time limit. I've had students record up to 11 minutes of talking. And with 38 students in one course, I don't have 11 minutes for 38 students every week to share for their assignments. So I limit their assignments 3 to 4 minutes. So you might want to set a time limit. When my students first started, I had to ask them to hold the map or the object up close to the camera so that I could see it. And then when they do, I can pause it and look at it. And to that end, I tell them that they don't need to include any wait time in their video because I can pause the video as I'm going through. And then that way they don't use any of their precious seconds pausing. I also ask them to record in a quiet place. I think sometimes they're in their environment and they're used to all of those sounds like the air conditioner running or the dogs barking outside or something like that. So you might want to remind them to record in a quiet place. Those are just some tips that I have found when I'm working with my students. So just a reminder that we're anchoring everything in these components of language arts. And so you can see how this one book, we've already gotten all of these different components in these engagements. So the next one that I like to do, and this gives me lots of fodder for many weeks to come, I ask them to go through and I ask them to put a star or some sort of a marking on a place on their map that holds a good memory. So that's what I have here. I have stars on each one of the places that holds a good memory for me. So this first star is where I first learned to ride a bike right outside my house. And my cousin Tim was helping me learn to ride a bike. So I mark this spot and then I can write a story about that particular spot. And because I'm the expert on that story, I already know how it's going to go, right? And so if you look on my map, I've got at least 6 different stories that I can write that go with my map of good memories. For writing and reading, you can ask students to write in a journal. And the online journal that I suggest that you use is called Penzu. And I have a Penzu account and I've had it for several years. So I have a lot of entries in it. Some of them are confidential, so I can't show you what my Penzu looks like. But I want to tell you that it's a free journal where students can go to type in their memory stories. There are free parts of it, and then there are parts that you can pay for. But remember, we're doing $5 worth of prep, so you can access this without paying for it and still have some good use. I also want to give you a hint that when your students, every time they submit their Penzu journal, it's going to show up in your inbox. So just be prepared to have lots of things show up in your inbox. Sometimes when things are free, we have to make sacrifices. So you can ask them each day or each week to pull out their map and to write a story of a good memory from that particular map. You can post the memory stories to the discussion board, and then you can ask students to include a photo. So suppose they did their backyard. You can ask them to include a photo of the swing set if they talk about that, or a special tree where they go to read. You can ask them to include a voice recording, right? So that includes the speaking and listening where they tell about it. You can ask students to respond to a classmate's story. So they read or listen to another classmate and then they can respond to that particular classmate. The other part that I really like about this is that you can invite family members to write a memory story based on the student's map. So as the child has that map out, family members can come and choose a special spot for them and they can write a story about it. When we talk about listening as a language arts component, sometimes we forget that listening to that read aloud is also part of listening, right? And then when we invite students to listen to each other's memory stories, they get to practice listening. And then students listen to the memory stories written by their own family members when they share. Other ways to engage students. I found that my students particularly like these foldables, these mini foldables. And so I've given you some links to some YouTube videos about how to make these mini notebooks, and students really like these. The first one is just a very simple 1-sheet, 8-page book. The second one is about 18 pages and it requires glue. And then the last one is 2 sheets and I'm not sure how many pages it makes, but they're pretty small. They look like this, right? And so then you can open them up and students can write in them. And what I find is that students will make them over and over and over again because they really like having those small books. What I would encourage you to do is Preview the videos. We should always preview these things before we let our students engage with them, right? So preview the videos beforehand and see if it's going to be appropriate for your students. And then make the books yourself. You can see that I did. And make the books yourself so that you can give kids hints as you're going through. I actually had a first grade teacher make this book with her first graders in an online classroom. So it can be done. And then let the students watch the videos. It's good practice for them to listen to somebody else and to follow those directions by watching on the screen. So let them watch the videos. And then if they're stuck, then they can come to us and ask for assistance. When we talk about viewing and visually representing, again, we're talking about getting kids out of the house, getting them away from the screen. One of the ways to do that is to invite them to take photos. I'm envisioning with a cell phone, a parent's cell phone or a grandparent's cell phone, and then they can take those photos and make a slideshow. And they can make that slideshow on Google Slides or on Canvas, and students can narrate that to accompany the slideshow. Students can also create a photo gallery of items gathered from their maps and post those on Padlet or Wakelet. Again, students record a narrative to accompany their slideshow. So they're doing the reading, writing, speaking, visually representing, and they're moving away from the screen, right? And they're having lots of family involvement. I don't know what you're finding, but my significant other teaches here in LCPS, and he teaches PE, and he'll give a family homework, and many of the families will video themselves doing the homework and send it in. So it's really kind of cool to see the families getting involved. So the last component that I put in my engagements is assessment. And here's where I'm going to say some things that might be a little bit far out for teachers thinking. But remember, we're teaching in a pandemic. We've been online since March. I think it's time that we give ourselves permission to assess students differently. They've been performing differently. So I would encourage us to do more broad assessments. So for these particular engagements, I would encourage you to think about, how can I grade these as completed or not completed? Or you could create a small rubric, right? So for the map of good memories, a rubric might include, do they have a key or a legend? Does it include a title? Did they use color? Did they fill in the entire page, right? Full frame? Did they submit it on time? But give yourself permission to create assignments that you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours sitting in front of your screen trying to grade. And I think these engagements, if you think about them, I think these engagements are open-ended enough that you could actually do a complete or not completed, or a 5-point rubric like what I've modeled here. So think about that. Think about that as an alternative. So in sum, how I plan these sorts of engagements is, first I choose a framework, and then I choose a theme, something that all of my students can fit within this particular frame, right? I don't leave anybody out. Then I anchor it in a story or a poem, something that's engaging that the students are going to care about. Then I create the engagements that students can complete independently without me and without the screen, right? And do with families. We want to pull those families in and help families help their students. And then think about those broad statements, broad assessments that you can use for these engagements. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining me on a Thursday afternoon. If you have any questions, I'm going to open it up for questions and answers here in just a second. But if you have any other questions that you think of, please email me. I'm pretty good at responding. I usually respond within 24 hours. I'm willing to assist you in anything that you need for your classroom as far as these type of engagements. And again, thank you for all the wonderful work that you're doing. Please know that you're appreciated and admired by a lot of people, even if they don't tell you.